Let's speak to Flor McCarthy. She's the author of The President's Letters, An Unexpected History of Ireland. But before we get into that, I'd like to show you an absolutely incredible moment during the Queen's reign where she actually spoke the Irish language. That was in 2011. Let's have a listen.
Uachtaráin agus a coide. With the benefit of historical hindsight, we can all see things which we would wish had been done differently, or not at all.
Well, Flor McCarthy, it's impossible to overstate how historic that was, really, given that Her Majesty the Queen went against the advice of Buckingham Palace, who were afraid that she might get some of the phonetical pronunciation wrong and it could overshadow all of the important meaning in all of that. And yet she went ahead knowing how important it was.
It's exactly that, Isabel. She went rogue, to use modern parlance. And it was just wonderful to see. A frisson went around St. Patrick's Hall in Dublin Castle, and some commentators have suggested that it was a momentous moment because, you know, her Irish delivery was so good. But we have to remember, she was a linguist. She spoke fluent French. She was a brilliant mimic. So it wasn't that. It was, as you say, the historic importance of this, the symbolism of it. Dublin Castle had been the seat of British, English, and then British power in Ireland for centuries, and so to speak Irish there, when it had been a language that was suppressed for so many hundreds of years, she knew exactly what she was doing. And President Mary McAleese knew exactly what she was doing when she had hoped that this would happen. So between them, these two women, these two heads of state, realised the symbolic importance of that moment.
And quite apart from the fact that she delivered it perfectly in a sort of linguistic sense, what was the impact of that? You know, how did it change things in Ireland?
Oh, it changed things enormously. I mean, you know, the correspondence that I've had the pleasure of reading through, thousands and thousands of letters. I spent lockdown researching for this book, and it was the first look at correspondence of the Irish presidencies going all the way back to 1937. But from 1952 and Queen Elizabeth's succession, you can see how the relationship evolved through the letters. And in the early decades, it was, excuse me, frog. It was very formal, as you'd expect, and there were messages of condolence. An early example would be a letter from Queen Elizabeth and her mother, the Queen Mother, to President Sean T. O'Kelly on the death of King George VI. But as you'd expect, very formal, very straight up, and no warmth or friendliness really on show. In the 1970s, it became quite fraught, because obviously the trouble in the north that we've just been hearing out there from Dougie really is reflected in the correspondence as well. But then in 1990, Mary Robinson became the President of Ireland, our first female president, and things really changed, and there was a warmth and a genuine friendliness in the correspondence, many of which was signed "Your good friend Elizabeth R." Many things. Now that moment was a highlight in that relationship between the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom. Here she was in Dublin Castle. The public realised that she was making an effort here to improve the relationship between nearest neighbours. And we must remember, Queen Elizabeth had wanted for decades to come to tea next door, as it were. And she seized the moment and she took that step. So it was hugely significant.
How fantastic. And just tell me, where are those letters kept? And how were you able to access them during lockdown?
With some brilliant detective work. You know, most of them are in the libraries you'd expect, the National Library of Ireland, our National Archives. I had to go to Windsor Castle archives for some of them. And in fact, the archive of Princess Grace of Monaco, because lots of those letters would have been exchanged as well. JFK too. You know, it's like a who's who of the 20th century. There is the book behind me. But really, the important thing about this envelope that we're discussing, it is a little envelope on which Mary McAleese phonetically wrote a Uachtaráin agus a Chorda, those words used by Queen Elizabeth to open her speech. There's a really interesting story. That, speaking of Irish, by the Queen was vetoed by Buckingham Palace in the weeks leading up to the extraordinary state visit. Too risky, they decided. If she stumbles in her Irish pronunciation, it's the only thing that will be remembered of the visit. The media will seize upon it. So they said no. Mary McAleese was a little bit disappointed, but she went with it. And a week before the visit, President McAleese got a visit of her own, a courtesy call in Áras an Uachtaráin, the presidential residence here in Dublin, by an old friend of hers from Northern Ireland. Francis Campbell was a British diplomat, and they had gone back to their student days together in Queen's University, Belfast. So Francis visited her, and as he was leaving, he took a crumpled old envelope out of his jacket pocket and a pen, and he said, "Mary, write down the words there you would have coached Queen Elizabeth to say." And she went, "No, Francis, it's off the table. It's not happening." And he said, "Oh, look, it's really just go on. Do that for me." So she did. She wrote it phonetically. And the next thing she knew, 1 week later, Queen Elizabeth II rose to her feet in Dublin Castle and delivered.
Yeah, and the rest is history. Absolutely incredible. I just want to read a quote from Her Majesty that I've seen doing the rounds in the wake of her passing, and it said, "It has been women who have breathed gentleness and care into the harsh progress of mankind," and it really seems, certainly in this relationship, that is very much true. Flor McCarthy, absolutely fascinating talking to you this morning about all of that. Thank you very much.